Foreign Office has been told by the parliamentary watchdog to formally apologise to a British academic who was sentenced to life in prison in the United Arab Emirates after being accused of spying.
Matthew Hedges says the ruling marks the first step in enabling him to truly heal after 5 years of campaigning. Matthew and his wife Daniela are here in the studio with us. Well, Matthew and Daniela are here now. Have you had the apology, Matthew?
No, we haven't. But it's a step in the right direction. Yeah.
And why is that apology something that you fought so hard for 5 years?
It's to get the acknowledgement. It's to have that understanding from the Foreign Office that they knew when they saw what was happening and that they should have done more to protect me from it.
Can you just explain, you were only meant to be there for 2 weeks, weren't you, as part of your social sciences PhD at Durham? What were you doing when you were there? I think people will think, well, what on earth brought you to the attention of the authorities in the UAE in the first place? Clearly wrongly, but what was it that you were doing that might have provoked their suspicions around your behaviour?
Sure, so it's a complete valid question. I was there undertaking some interviews, which had all been vetted through a university ethics procedure. So it was all, I had to change some of the activities that I was doing to make sure that it was safe.
In what way?
That I wasn't going to interview Emirati nationals.
Right.
I could only interview British or American nationals.
Who were living in...
Correct.
Is it Dubai you were going to?
Abu Dhabi.
Yes,
Dhabi.
Fine.
So I was then... And these are all people I had already known through my professional work. The problem is, whilst we could have this conversation about how I could have possibly come across their radar, it's since been revealed in the Pegasus leaks from a few years ago that the UAE had actually hacked my phone whilst I was in the UK before I'd even left. So when the creation of the story that someone had come to them and asked them to investigate me, this is simply a lie because they were already watching me when I was in the UK.
Because in a sense, you were poking around in their view. You were poking around their laws, their social structure and how they treated their British or American expats who were living there? So
it's not poking around.
No, I mean, in their view, I mean, it's a sort of...
No, but their allegation is that you were working for the British government
as a spy. Yeah.
That was their allegation. That was what
and it must have felt extraordinary to you.
It was both extremely... because I was isolated,
sure.
the pressure, it was terrifying, but also hilarious because the accusations, the questions, the interrogations were truly... it was such a difficult situation to be in. Nothing made sense.
Can we ask you about the Ombudsman's report?
Sure.
The Ombudsman says it's hard to imagine the experience Mr Hedges has endured, quite how terrifying his detention must have been. But they also say it was made worse by the failure of the British government, that the Foreign Office failed to see the alleged torture and mistreatment. Can you remember being visited by the Foreign Office officials? Can you describe it to us? Were you allowed to say to them what was actually happening to you, or were you kind of worried about your safety and therefore did they need to spot what was going on? What was actually happening in those visits?
So for the context, as the Ombudsman notes, between 2010 and 2019, 75 British nationals have reported torture in the UAE.
Yeah.
And the Foreign Office acknowledges that the UAE practiced torture. So in that first meeting I had with a consular official, which was after 6 weeks of
in prison?
I was held in detention. I was held by state security, so it wasn't a formal prison. Right. It was like
a holding cell where they could sort of...
It's an extra legal process. Yeah. It's not...
Because it's spying, so it's different to a normal crime, isn't it? Yeah.
Completely.
So where were you when you were visited by the Foreign Office official?
This was at the State Security Prosecutor's Office. Right. But in this meeting, in a room maybe the size of the studio, with sofas on the outsides, it was the consular official sitting opposite. It was armed guards, fully in black with machine guns. I was told I'm not allowed to talk about the case. He was told he was not allowed to talk about the case. And it lasted less than 5 minutes.
So what should the Foreign Office have seen?
To be honest, it didn't need to see anything because they should have known before we even got to that point, this is very clearly an extreme position for this British national to be in. It was very, very, very little communication. I think I spoke to Danny once or twice.
And not to mention, Matt was held in solitary confinement without any communications for weeks at a time. It got to a point where it was months. And that in itself constitutes torture. So he was held completely isolated for nearly 7 months. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, and what you cite, I suppose, is that there's a relationship, a trade relationship. There's a relationship that the UK has, quite a close relationship with the UAE for different reasons. And you feel, do you, that that got in the way, in some way, of seeing what was truly happening to you and protecting you?
Quite possibly. It's absolutely natural for the UK and other states to be able to maintain those foreign relations, but it's getting that balance right. And in my case, in the case of some British nationals currently, Ala Abdel Fattah and Jackdaw Singh in India, the UK government, the Foreign Office, has shown a reluctance to protect British nationals. And so whilst it happened to me, it happened to other people. The concept on why we're really, truly fighting is because it can happen to anyone. And as we've seen, the Foreign Office is extremely reluctant to do anything about it. But what's then been particularly, is nearly an insult for me, is when I see British MPs currently who are welcoming with opening arms Emiratis into Parliament.
I mean, not to mention the fact that Matt was being accused of being a British spy. That tells you the closeness of the relationship. And if the UAE are willing to make that accusation, why aren't the UK willing to stand up?
Just one final question. The Ombudsman has advised you be awarded £1,500 in compensation. Seems a small sum. You're saying that actually what you really care about is the apology.
Correct.
But what would you tell students, business people, tourists who are going to the UAE? Would you say don't go?
No, it's not for me to tell them what to do and what not to do, but for them to do the research and understand that actually the situation is far more complex than the pitch, the branding that the country sets. British nationals have been tortured. The Foreign Office knows people are tortured in the UAE. So are you actually then truly safe? Think about COP later on this year. It'll be held in the UAE. Are you then safe as an individual or a company to go and attend?
Well, the UAE government insists that Matthew did get proper care. We're going to read this out, and that was never subjected to or threatened with torture. The Foreign Office told us that they take all allegations of torture extremely seriously and that they will review the findings in full and respond in due course. And I suppose that response will be an apology at some point, since they've been told to apologise to you in no uncertain terms. Well, I hope you're well now, and I hope that you can heal now from your ordeal, because I know that that's what you really want to do. Thank you to both Matthew and Daniel for joining us this morning.